All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome.
Hey,
Hello. Um, Great. So I figure I think we talked about starting with some a brief section of recent news, then we can jump into some of the ideas. If anyone's had ideas basically since I guess 2 weeks ago about that recipe book idea. And then if anyone has more things to talk about, feel free to throw them in to the doc. It's on the calendar, but I'll put a link here too in case people don't have that. Well, I believe this meeting is recorded, and participation is agreement to abide by the code of conduct and all of that as well. Um, cool. So I did have one piece of news that I thought we could cover. Let me find the link. I'll put this here into the notes. This was a malicious PyPI packages. That basically took over, a known package and to deliver some and a remote access Trojan via that. And that goes into like a lot of analysis of the actual attack. What I find is so interesting here is like, um, I don't know, I these like typo squatting attacks. I just feel like I figure there's a new one every week. It seems like, and it's kind of it seems like one of those things that no matter how much we talk about supply chain security, they seem to keep happening and keep getting downloaded by various people. Which to me is kind of the most interesting thing here, just how persistently effective this attack vector remains. But I don't know. Anyone has any thoughts there? I can give people time to actually look too, but
one thing that has come up that I'm kind of curious about is um, there is limiting, and I know it's some like, limiting the what kind of tools you use in CI.
Mhm.
Um, like I see a lot of like uh, GitHub Actions. That people, third-party GitHub Actions that is like, oh, like somebody searches for it, or I don't
Yeah.
know if your LLM auto completes it because it's like it's simple, but it's just some random third-party GitHub action with 50 stars that um uh that really would not take more than 10 lines of using or even less, or sometimes just using the GH command line
Mhm.
CLI, which is available. Um, so I don't know, like flagging, and I've seen some tools do this of flagging third-party GitHub actions. In this case, it's not a GitHub action, but it sounds like, a tool that is used in CI for doing your spell checking
Mhm.
things that, and I don't know if this particular one is super popular, um, which is, that's generally been my baseline is like, it's hard not to use third-party stuff, but I like to see that it's got like at least 500 stars on it, that it's fairly widespread. If something happens, like I'm not going to be the only one impacted. Somebody might discover it. Like if
Yeah.
it's something small, like it could be uh, compromised and nobody even realizes for a long time. Whereas if it's something big, it's more likely to get noticed quickly.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. I think a lot of them fall into that category of just like a new library with a familiar looking name that people throw up to try and confuse people. Um, so yeah, the and I th and you do hear about the crazy ones, right? With popular packages, maintain a switch, they get taken over, whatever. But I do think that, that as you say, that gets more attention and I think is actually more rare than this kind of more basic typo squatting type. strategy. Yeah. Anyway, that was the main supply chain news that kind of caught my attention in the past week or so. If anyone has anything else, we can chat briefly for a couple of minutes before we jump in. Cool. So yeah, for folks who weren't here last time, which was 2 weeks ago, we had a bit of a discussion about kind of what we wanted to do as this group in within the software supply chain security space. And one kind of idea that we coalesced around was this idea of creating kind of supply chain recipe books. There's a lot of like long documents about best practices and like what to do, but I think a lot of this is like written for people who want to read the whole thing, right? It's people who really want to become experts in this space. But we think there's space for something that's a little bit more like practitioner focused, short recipe books, as I think we're currently calling them. I'm happy to have new names. Um, and that explain like, for this one thing, what are some best practices in really practical terms. Um, and so yeah, so I guess I wanted to open up like where do we want to start with this idea? Do we still think this idea is a good idea? And do we have any specific topics for these recipe books that would be like a good first one, something to test out the idea? I know Trask, I think you had some ideas last time, but yeah,
Yeah, so I did make a list of things to sort of that we've discussed in open telemetry, and I will put those
perfect.
in here. Let's see if I can. Nope. Uh,
Or does it not allow them both tab?
form formatting and let's see.
Is it it'll
Oh
work?
yeah. Uh, we'll mix we'll mix bullet points. Yeah, so let's see. The first link, I'd say the main thing that we have that has helped kind of drive stuff in the open telemetry repositories has been the scorecard, the OpenSSF scorecard. Um, and so kind of the things that we've kind of paid attention to and have tried to um, uh, improve across the repos has been minimal workflow, token permissions. Um, uh, that one is pretty straightforward. I don't think like this we need like any kind of necessarily recipe book other than maybe publishing an LLM prompt to help people automatically do that because it's very tedious, especially across a lot of repositories. Um, Pin dependencies. Um, for the most part, this can be, or for a lot of dependencies, this can be done automatically via, we've primarily uh, using Renovate. I think um, ideally, if we publish anything from this group, I think it would be nice to publish recipe for both Renovate and Dependabot since they're both very uh, commonly used. Um, so that's the dependency update tool also. Kind of questions that I think would be interesting for this to would be guidance on grouping and scheduling of updates. Like once you start pinning dependencies, you start getting spammed with lots of dependency update PRs, which can be annoying based on depending on how many repositories you have. And so we've played around with grouping them like I think so far, currently our best practice is grouping patch updates um, daily, which doesn't reduce a whole lot because we're kind of like, well, we should apply patches quickly. We shouldn't let them stray. But then there's the alter argument that maybe you should have some delay in updating dependencies.
Yeah.
And then we apply weekly minor updates, minor and major updates weekly. But those we don't group them with but now I'm kind of regretting that because like especially GitHub Action updates hardly ever break things, so I think it might be reasonable to group those. Um,
Yeah, and I
then
don't know about Renovate, but at least in Dependabot, when they don't group them, you have to like merge the PRs one at a time for them to rebase, which is always a pain. But
oh yes, yes, and that's an interesting um, connection there with depending on your repo setup if you require PRs to be up to date before
yeah,
merging.
yeah, I think this is the problem is we require that, and so you have to like wait 5 minutes between. Anyway,
Yeah, yep. Um, yeah, so in some repos we've gone to merge queues, which is helps with that. Um, static code analysis. Let's see, let me add that. That's an interesting aspect. Branch up. Static code analysis. We haven't really done much with it, except that I think most repos do run CodeQL. And not don't have much. I don't know how well that is working. Um, I've seen a couple of alerts from it on repos that I maintain, but not too much. Um, and then signed releases, the whole discussion I think we had last time about GitHub attestations. So this is all kind of like supply chainy stuff. And then the other, oh, and I added below the, which we could add in here. It's not really part of the, um, there's nothing for it in the OSSF scorecard report, but I do like the idea of bar discussing a bar for third party, suggested bar for third party tooling and dependencies. Um, and then outside of supply chain security, there's the whole vulnerability management recommendations. But maybe we can table that discussion for now and um, uh, open up for anything that people. I'd be interested in any of those above supply chain topics as sort of a initial recipe that we work on, but interested in if anyone has other things that they're interested in or if any of these particularly resonate.
yeah, this looks great. Let's start with if anyone has any other ideas, and then we can start kind of like narrowing after we have a full list, if that sounds all right. Um, yeah, does anyone else have things in software supply chain security that are either actively bothering them now or have actively bothered you in the past, that you think we could have some useful guidance on?
It looks quite good. I was wondering if it might sound very already known things, but do we need to remind people things like don't make main writable, include things like double reviews everywhere, everything regarding the source type of uh, attacks against the supply chain.
Repository configuration.
Right.
Yeah, the OSSF scorecard does have some checks for that, which are I think kind of do align with what you were saying. Like it does check branch protections, and they do ask for uh, the review count of two people, which is something that we don't follow on a lot of OpenTelemetry repositories. We just have one review.
Yeah, I feel there's probably something there just about how to make that workable or something, right? In an open source volunteer-based project, right? How do you do that?
Yeah, I think that that's a very nice recipe book, though, because it's very concrete, like um, repository configuration steps. We've been using this last year. In OpenTelemetry we started using Terraform to manage all of our repo configurations, which has been um, nice. I like it. It's very nice to have all of that under source control. Those configurations and has helped us to um, standardize and make sure that we're applying all of those because it's hard to go click through 80 repos and like check what the settings configurations are. Although this automated report is great from the OSSF.
Okay, this is great. Yeah, any other ideas before we start trying to to narrow down for a first one? Because hopefully these will each be short, right? So we can get to a bunch of them eventually if it all goes well. So okay, if not, we can go over these and try and see a good place to start. The way I'm thinking about it, a good place to start will be something that's a little bit more straightforward, but like interesting enough, like or like complicated enough that we can like practice writing this and hopefully provide early value to anyone who wants it. Um, so like basically the way I'm thinking about it, and this is just for the first one, not for like in general, but like the GitHub attestations, for example, I think I'm actually very excited about, but worried that we're gonna get lost in a little bit of weeds for the first one. Um, so would maybe put that one off. Um, let's go through in order. So workflow tokens, I think that one should be pretty straightforward. Dependencies might be an interesting place to start because I think a lot of people run into that problem and have questions, but I think the advice is pretty straightforward as far as I think anyway, right? Even around things like merge queues and options like that, I think it's pretty um, like you don't have to understand signing queues or anything, right? Um, it's just that. And then I think static code analysis, I would also say is maybe there's probably a whole world there that we might get into. So maybe put that one off. Um, that's kind of where I'm leaning. What any other thoughts on that? Just kind of where we think will be a good scoped first step.
I
Yeah,
like
I think
that sounds good.
yeah, I like both the pinned the dependency. Now, were you thinking dependency updates in general or pin dependencies or sort of combining those?
Yeah, I let's see. We could do either. Yeah, well, if I want to scope it properly, so maybe picking one. I think dependency update might be a good one because it's complicated enough that it's hard for people, right? And then but it's not, but it's like, it's again a little bit more bounded, I think, than the attestation question. Um, but if they end up, if
Just
it
for
makes sense,
me,
yeah.
I had a small question regarding the dependencies. We're talking dependencies from the perspective of like package library dependencies, right? There's probably one thing that is very close that we can also talk about, which is like containers, because containers will have things like the base image, how to choose that, all the packages that will get into your deliverable because you're doing an like you're adding an RPM on top of a base image or things like that. And there's a lot of best practices actually to say about how to construct containers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think for the
there's
sake of
GitHub action, there's CI
yeah,
dependencies, there's code dependencies, there's yeah, container
There's the whole
dependencies.
copy dot dot don't do, the whole dot the end don't do, to that might include your secrets or your history of Git or lots of things like that that we can talk about.
yeah, this one actually might be bigger than I originally thought.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. No, this is great. I think it's good to keep it all to figure out the whole scope really. So this is great. But yeah, maybe what we can do too, if we want to go with this one first, is like pick some corner of it, and then that actually would lead to a really easy second, third step, right? Because we do that corner and then we say it's similar to this other thing. Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
Hey, sorry, I'm mostly listening today because my connection is spotty, um, due to the storms. But I was just going to say, I think this is a really good place to start because it's such a universal experience. Like, you don't have to be an expert in supply chain security. You just have to be someone who owns some build pipelines, and suddenly this is thrust upon you. And
Mhm.
so, like, it's starting from a universal, um, something that people can relate to. So I think it makes sense to start here, like in an 80-20 kind of way, you know.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. So
The only other thing I was going to say from earlier, I've been connecting in and out. Sorry, um, is the many of those people, and I was in this situation years ago myself. When you're dealing with dependencies and the dependabot thing and merge queues and all of that, there's oftentimes not like a clear way to triage. It's like, okay, well, I've got this swarm of dependabot alerts across of scores of repos, and there's just everything is all these little packetized things. Where do I start and how do I know that I'm doing the right thing? Right. And if I do one thing now, I have to go update all these other things, in terms of these individual alerts. So I think another common experience is just that how do I know what's important when I'm faced with all of these things I need to do? It's a general problem, but I think it's very acute in the dependency space. So guidance or you know playbooks around this make a lot of sense to me. So I'm just cheerleading here, but I'll go back on mute now.
yeah, thanks. This is great. Cool.
I
Camilla,
kind of I kind of like the idea of spending, the first week or two like fleshing out the all the different aspects of dependencies. Because it would be nice to have like, okay, here's the big picture of all the different kinds of dependencies and all the different things that we would want to tackle under this big umbrella. Um, and then we can go off and tackle them one by one. But I worry if we go off and tackle one without like seeing that big picture, that we'll just kind of keep circling back to the big picture, like because there's so many interesting dependency questions.
yeah, I think that's a great idea. And that way, when we pick a topic, we'll know the exact scope of that topic we pick, which I think is the scope creep is the thing I'm trying to avoid here. So that's perfect. Um, cool. Everyone happy with this focus on dependencies? It sounds like it, but if any objections before we dive in, awesome. Um, So yeah, I agree. I think that the next step is going to be so maybe we can keep chatting for another bit here about other areas in dependencies. Make sure we kind of brainstorm together, and then maybe I'll try and get this organized somehow into a doc before next week to share, just so that we see something structured about the different areas and can go from there. And maybe I'll try and share that early, like before next Monday, so that other people can add to it and etc. Related, before we start actually talking, though, is where to do that sharing. We can just do it in the is a thread in the tag security channel all right with everybody, or do you want to make a separate Slack channel? CNCF Slack, okay. We could do email, I don't care.
I think a channel would be good.
Yeah, okay, I'll work on that. Can I do that? Can I just do it? Let's try it.
I think so.
Okay. Okay, cool. Yeah, I can just make it. So, can I link to it? Anyway, I'll put it in here and in the doc. The name of the channel that I just made, it's in the CNCF Slack. Session. Okay, cool. Just and that way we can I can share that doc and we can keep chatting about this async. Or anything else if people have thoughts and stuff, feel free to just use that. And after this meeting, I'll post that I made that. But yeah, so taking a step back, dependencies. So what other areas? We've talked about container dependencies, repository dependencies, like kind of code dependencies, dependency updates, triaging, pinning. Oh, thank you. Yeah, someone for writing down my word vomit. And then yes. What else do we have? Oh yeah, so we have CI and code. Yeah, because that's another distinction I think we haven't made yet. Because you have the stuff that runs in your CI that's not actually running code, and then you have the dependencies you pull in to like, I don't know, actually using your code. Within container dependencies, yes, we have base images plus packages. You can even talk about system dependencies, but that might be a little out of scope here. Right, what's the software and hardware you're actually doing all this on and all of that. I'm gonna call that out of scope.
I think, I mean, that's CI
Yeah,
dependencies.
I guess that is, yeah, it's part of that. So
Um,
and then I guess I'll put vulnerabilities here too, like specifically like dependency vulnerabilities. I think like respond.
ooh, yeah, that's a big
Yeah.
topic.
Yeah, 'cause I think a lot of this is about preventing that, but then it does happen. So how do we deal with that? Oh yeah, and dependency update. I missed.
Yeah, Maria, just shared an article. I know we are talking about dependency in the security community, supply chain community for a long time, but I think it's also well known that there's this saying that the defender need to think in graph. So how do we transition from talking about dependency to talking about graph? Dependency is what I mean is a tree, depending tree versus graph.
Oh, you mean like so like understanding so like we depend on these projects, we should depend on these projects, but thinking that more as like a graph.
Yeah, for example, talking about software dependency, then there's a system dependency, system security, hardware security, and we have model security, data security. So they're not kind of one-dimensional. So, and of course, if you look at that, even that article, simply talking about software security, it still says a graph is needed. So how do we make that transition from dependency tree to graph, dependencies graph?
Yeah, I think that raises the question, probably something we should add here is like understanding dependencies, like sort of the thing that SBOMs are designed to solve, right? Like where do we think about not just what we pull in, but what we pulls in, all of that. Um yeah, and SBOMs I feel like especially like what to do with them. I think there's a lot of talk about making them and whatever, but
Yeah,
yeah.
there's this concept called, so you see, if people generate different SBOM for different dimension, right? For let's say one for system hardware, then one for
Mhm.
software security, and then when you merge two tree, it may not end up being a tree because just it's a tree is one direction. When you merge two graph, it's always a graph.
Mhm. I feel like I'm trying to understand the like the purpose of the framing though. So it's like is the purpose that like um your dependencies rely on each other as well? Is that like the big takeaway, or is what's the
I guess the article probably says much clearer than I can
okay, yeah,
describe.
I can read that, sorry, and understand it better. But
I was trying also to understand if by graph they meant something like some of the things that Guac, for example, is trying to solve, which is presenting the data from SBOMs, VEX, and other stuff as a graph so that we can kind of make sense of it more easily? Or are we talking about lateral movements by saying I can exploit this vulnerability on this component and then jump from that to another component other in another place?
My
Yeah,
my
skimming the article, that's my understanding. The article is more about less about supply chain security and more about security of your components in your architecture.
Yeah. Okay, got it.
my understanding of graph is it's the way to analyze the graph data. However, the data the ingested may not be properly massaged. So there also in the graph there's I don't know what's being used in Grok because there's semantic graph and property graph databases. So to be able to have ultimate semantic clearance, it needs to be semantic graph. So I know Marina has a PhD. I don't probably feel here probably have a better more understanding of that. So my understanding, yeah, it's not only analyzing the end result, it's also how to correct it and prepare it so that it can be used properly before it go to the clock stage.
I think you're on mute, Marina.
thank you. Um, something you said there too reminded me that we probably should say something about or at least define as out of scope or in scope the AI dependencies as well, like whether the AI model dependencies are, you know.
Yeah. What you said about what to do with the data analysis is pretty important. Are, are we kind of scoping this around the use in cloud native or Kubernetes or not necessarily?
That's a great question. I guess we sit like this group is theoretically in the CNCF, so I think within reason a cloud native focus. But I think if we make stuff that's
Okay.
useful beyond that. I think more is the better. That's kind of where I sit. And I think that we can see as we go, maybe depending on the topic, figure out how much that focus is important. Because like some of this stuff, like the container dependencies, is obviously pretty cloud native, but the rest of it feels pretty universal, at least to me, within software.
Okay. Then here in the what to do maybe with the data or data analysis, we should talk about things that can leverage all these SBOM, attestation, blah, 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 all of that stuff. So it could be Guac, but it could be also things like Kyverno or Kyverno. I don't know how you pronounce it. And there's also one thing that was quite interesting, I believe, which was called Cubescape, which has this different way to see it by doing some sort of snapshot of how a service should look versus how it's behaving now and saying, oh, I see a diff, therefore there might be something running on the cluster that shouldn't be running, which is kind of very interesting perspective than the usual SBOM attestation and go analyze through all of that bunch of data. I'm adding from here.
Yeah. Okay, this is great. We have a very long list here. So hopefully we can yeah, so maybe do we have any first instincts as to what directions we want to start in? I don't think we have to commit to this today, but like especially as I write, I'm gonna try and copy this list into a doc or something for us to define the scope. But yeah, do you think we need more time over the week to add more to this list, or are folks feeling ready to kind of start picking something to start with and then add to it as we go? This feels to me like a pretty comprehensive list, but
yeah, it's already a good start, I think.
Maybe container or CI dependencies. Looking for something that's not like trivial. Not that anything's trivial, but like code dependencies.
yeah, codependencies really get into that whole graph tree thing, right? With the
Yeah, once
Yeah,
you get to code dependency, then we got web code dependency, which become data dependency, model dependency.
I'm trying to think from the perspective of things I've heard open telemetry maintainers ask about, and code dependencies and test dependency. Like those are, I don't think people are, I haven't seen too much confusion about them and about, using Renovate or Dependabot to update them. They're generally using package manager, and so there's not as much of a problem of the pinning, at least for immutable package managers, which I realize is not everyone.
yeah, I think cloud native is very generally to be overly general, uses a lot of Go, and so which does have the very good pinning for the code dependencies.
I really like to start with the CI dependencies, maybe because I'm focused on that area now. I'm really studying more about that. So I'm seeing more things like attacks happening in build pipelines and things like that, and a lot relates to the dependencies as well. So I thought it'd be, and I haven't seen much material on that too.
I like it.
Okay, that sounds great. So we'll do CI dependencies. Oh. Um, yeah, so maybe and I think this talk will do I think a really good job of helping us scope it topic wise. And then I think we can chat briefly about goals, and then maybe I'll try and before next week write up like a quick, doc with scope and goals and stuff so we can make sure we're all on the same page. And then we can get into it. So yeah, let's talk about goals very briefly. We have a couple minutes left. Because I think we kind of know we want to do this idea of a recipe card for that. So if you want to just kind of help define that really briefly, and then I can write that up. Um, um,
Yeah, so like practical guidance, tooling, recommendations.
and I think
Maybe validation.
maybe something about length, like what because I think shorter is within reason, shorter I think is going to be better to get these done. And and people will read them, especially if our goal is to get practitioners to have some practical advice. If we give them a 10-page essay, they may, have better things to do. um, not that this isn't important, but does like 3 pages max sound like something we could do this in? Does that sound too ambitious?
CI dependencies is a rich area touching on a lot of these pieces, such as, pinning, triaging, responding to vulnerabilities, quality bar.
Yeah, so like if we
Um,
focus on CI for the first one, like do you think we can do it in, I don't know, 2, 3 pages?
We can always reference other
Yeah,
recipe cards.
exactly. That would be great. And other stuff that exists in the world, right? If there's like some for more detail, see whatever. Um, yeah. That would be my goal, is just to keep it short. That way we can get through a bunch of these topics and get folks to review it and all that stuff. But um, if people think it's impossible.
it's good to have goals.
Yeah, okay.
I support.
You can always change the font size, right? And then anything can be 3 pages. But
Or we can decide to cut it. Say, okay, we need to have a recipe card for CI dependencies and specific
yeah, we can
subtopic.
exactly we can narrow the scope further as needed. I like that. Yeah. And like again, like if it's 3.1 pages, like I don't care. It's the idea is I think to try and keep us like yeah.
Yeah, I like that, that we can always split out things further if we find that that's needed.
Yeah. Okay, this seems good. I think this is a nice kind of again, I'll organize this somewhere that we can refer to for like what our goals are, especially if new people join the group so everyone knows what's going on. But this sounds great. And then yeah, maybe starting next week, unless anyone wants to try and take that on, we can start drafting something and then talking about it. Does anyone want to have time this week to start doing like an outline or something, or do we want to do that next week after we finalize this? I may also post an issue in the TOC repo, just kind of letting you know about this initiative, etc. Because I think especially when it comes to publication, that could be helpful. If the earlier we tell them, the more likely they'll help us publish it. So And they may have ideas about scope and stuff too. So I'll write down that I'm gonna do that stuff.
I had a quick question, and it might be just it might just be that I wasn't available at the last meeting. But when you say practitioner, is there a particular persona that you're zeroing in on? I mean, is it everything from developers to people who own CI or own build pipelines or things like that, or work in a security function? Just what type of practitioner are we? Is in scope?
DevSecOps.
Okay.
No, just kidding, just kidding. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either. My first time joining.
A lot of question mark. But yeah, it's a good question and something we should define properly.
Like my mind is spinning in lots of parallel directions about like these topics and what could be written in a few pages, and I come to like a couple different versions, you know.
Yeah, I think for the thing that comes to mind for me is maintainers, which I know is still a very broad practitioner. Maintainers come in all stripes, but I think that's to me the group I would like to help with this guidance. But
That's my target audience, very specifically is open telemetry maintainers. We've got like about 140 people who are maintainers of various repos. And so, yeah,
yeah,
corralling them and giving them some guidance.
maybe we can even broaden that to just like, CNCF project maintainers, right? Like
Yeah.
how can we help all of them?
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I'm working on a different initiative in the same space that's more around using Guac and some tooling, and so I've been kind of hungry for some specific scenarios or things. So I'm kind of seeing what comes out here as complementary, and perhaps there's some cross pollination that could happen, or at least I'm sure I could use some of these scenarios and recipes, and perhaps provide some automation that can help realize that.
That would be great. Yeah. One of the things we talked about last time was about like how to share these out. And I think we're going to try and write one and then see how the momentum gathers.
Awesome.
Around that could be super useful. Very cool. Any final thoughts in the last 8.5 minutes? Okay, cool. Thank you all for coming. And I'll try and get that doc shared before the end of the week, and see you all next week. Okay, have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, bye.